Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into some really complex source material you shared with us. It covers, well, everything from neurolinguistic programming
Yeah.
to some pretty foundational psychoanalysis.
That's right.
And we're pulling out specific strategies for regaining emotional control in these really tough relational dynamics.
Exactly. And our mission today, it's very focused. We're distilling actionable methods, ways to achieve emotional freedom.
Okay.
And these methods, the sources actually frame them as the ultimate challenge, almost like a kind of torture for a narcissistic personality.
Torture is a strong word.
It is, but it highlights the impact.
Yeah.
And crucially, you need to understand this whole thing is about your self-work, reclaiming your own space, your sovereignty. It's absolutely not about revenge or trying to manage their behavior.
Right. It's an internal shift, not an external battle.
Precisely.
And the sources we're looking at are quite something. They mix really practical neurostrategies, referencing people like Vera F. Birkenbill on, reprogramming mental patterns,
Neuronal reprogramming?
with the big historical hitters. Freud, Jung, Kernberg, Kohut. We're not just looking at the what, we're getting the why and the how to change it within yourself.
And before we even jump into the how, we really have to nail down the core premise here, the thing that makes these strategies work and why they're needed.
Okay, lay it out.
For a narcissist, fundamentally, the other person isn't really a separate subject with their own inner world.
Not a person, but
An object, yeah. A mirror, maybe a stage, an extension of themselves, and critically, a source of energy. Validation. Supply.
So every time you react, explain yourself. Suffer visibly.
You're feeding the system. You're giving them exactly what they need to keep their own internal structure propped up. You're playing the game.
Okay, so if reacting is the fuel, what starves the engine?
Yeah.
What's the thing they just can't handle?
According to this material, it boils down to emotional silence. The sources often call it emotional still.
Emotional silence.
Yeah, it's that void, that inner absence. It's not about giving them the silent treatment out of anger, which they can often use. It's about your complete, genuine internal withdrawal from their drama.
That sounds deceptively simple.
Yeah.
Because achieving real emotional silence when someone's pushing all your buttons feels incredibly difficult.
Oh, it is. It takes practice.
And this is where the sources get really interesting, right? Translating this silence into, brain mechanics.
That's exactly it. The narcissistic brain, well, like any brain really, thrives on predictable patterns they've learned through experience. If I do action A, maybe a subtle put down, a bit of gaslighting, a sudden withdrawal,
Right.
I can flip a switch in the other person and reliably get reaction B. Maybe that's defensiveness, tears, apologies, explanations.
You become predictable.
Yeah.
Like an algorithm.
You got it. You're functioning as an emotional statistical factor in their world. But when action A doesn't produce reaction B, when you don't follow the script,
Then what?
the system experiences a pattern break. The sources literally describe it as the brain crashing. The expected input-output loop fails.
So the goal isn't changing them. We know that's probably impossible, but it's about rewiring your own brain.
Yeah.
Neuronal reprogramming in your head.
Exactly. You're shifting gears, moving from that automatic knee-jerk reaction mode into a more detached, strategic observation mode.
Okay, but how does someone listening actually do that in the moment?
Well, it starts with acknowledging the trigger, the stimulus they just threw at you, but then, crucially, you choose a different neural pathway.
Instead of the usual one.
Right. Think of it like this.
Yeah.
They throw out some bait, maybe something that usually triggers instant self-doubt or the need to justify yourself.
Okay.
In the past, your brain might have immediately jumped down that rabbit hole, defending, explaining, seeking their approval.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
The reprogramming means consciously inserting a pause, maybe just a deep breath. And in that pause, you actively label the stimulus. That's their script. That's the pattern. That's not actually about me.
You observe it instead of embodying it.
Exactly. You see the pattern, you recognize its predictability, and instead of getting sucked in, you just stay autonomous. You stay in your own mental space.
You stop being the ping pong ball they can just whack back and forth.
You become an unpredictable element. And that unpredictability, it disrupts their sense of control, their toxic security. That break in their loop, that's the agony for them.
And without that reflection, without you playing your assigned role on their stage,
They have to go elsewhere. Or implode, metaphorically speaking. They're cut off from their main energy source, your reaction.
Okay, that brings us neatly to the actual strategies, the how-to for achieving this state. And the sources stress, this isn't about being cold or mean. It's strategic. It's psychological maturity.
Absolutely. Strategy 1 is what the sources call active emotional shutdown. Active emotional Abschaltung.
Active shutdown. Sounds intense.
It is, but it's an internal declaration. It's saying, I see the game, I'm not playing. See, narcissists are often masters of emotional reading. They pick up on microexpressions, hesitations in your voice, your body language.
Like an emotional GPS.
That's a great way to put it. They use it to find your vulnerabilities, your unresolved stuff, and they target it. It's their ammunition.
So if you become unreadable, emotionally and neutral.
Their GPS breaks, the signal's lost, they don't know how to navigate,
Right.
and that flows directly into strategy 2. Breaking emotional predictability. Brechen der emotionalen Vorhersehbarkeit.
Breaking predictability. We touched on this.
Yeah, their whole system is kind of addicted to patterns, even the toxic ones, because patterns mean control. If every time they poke you in a certain way, you predictably cry or apologize or lash out.
They know exactly how to manage you. They've won before it even starts.
Right. But if they use that same poke, that same provocation, and this time you respond with, say, silence, or a calm, factual, neutral statement, maybe even a slight shrug.
You pull the rug out.
Completely. It triggers that internal collapse we talked about. They expected script A, response B. You give them script A, response 0.
And that loss of control is terrifying for them.
It's their greatest terror. The sources repeat this. The narcissist often lacks a stable inner structure. No solid internal moral compass. No real self-regulating mechanism.
So they regulate using us.
Using external actions and reactions, they actually need your instability, your emotional reactivity, to maintain their own shaky sense of stability, your calm, your coherence. It's deeply threatening.
Wow. That's a huge insight. Their stability depends on your instability, which leads perfectly into strategy 3. Denying them that instability altogether. Intentional neutrality. Absichtliche Neutralität.
This isn't passive, it's a conscious, active positioning. It's refusing to give them any of the expected emotional payoffs.
Not the anger.
Nope.
Not the sadness.
Not the tears.
Not the defensiveness or counterattack.
None of it. It's that calm, centered stance that essentially communicates, I see the performance you're putting on, I see the illusion, and I'm choosing not to participate.
What does that do to them?
This non-confirmation, this lack of the reflection they desperately need, pushes them into what the sources term an existential vacuum. Their sense of self is so fragile, so dependent on that external mirroring, that your neutrality feels like annihilation.
And it's important to remember the root of this, right? That deep fragility. The sources mention extremely low frustration tolerance.
Often, yeah. Developed in childhood environments where maybe love was conditional, based on performance. So when their go-to strategy fails, they don't have healthy coping mechanisms. They can't easily pivot or self-soothe.
They need to be seen,
Yeah.
admired, feared even, just reacted to.
To feel like they exist. So when you start providing that energy, when you turn your focus entirely inward onto yourself and your own reality, they're cut off, starved.
Okay, these strategies, the silence, the neutrality, breaking predictability, they feel powerful. But let's dig a bit deeper into the why. Why does this lack of reaction cause such, well, psychological havoc for them?
Yeah, understanding the roots is key. We need the historical context to grasp the sheer depth of their need for external validation.
Let's go there.
Freud.
Okay, Sigmund Freud, way back in 1914, he sort of laid the groundwork. Defined narcissism as investing your psychic energy, your libido, into your own ego.
Right.
And he made a distinction. Primary narcissism, that's the normal, healthy self-focus of an infant, totally necessary for development.
Okay.
Versus secondary narcissism, that's an adult thing, a kind of regression. It's basically a failure to develop or maintain healthy object love for others. So the energy gets withdrawn from others and hyper-invested back into this fragile self.
So in a way, they're using you, the object, to try and fill that void, to replace the healthy connection they couldn't sustain.
That's a good way to think about it, yes. Then you've got Carl Jung. He came at it from a slightly different angle, more symbolic, maybe,
Yeah.
focusing on ego inflation.
Exactly. Jung talked about inflation. That's where the ego gets puffed up, identifies with this grandiose self-image, and basically confuses itself with the capital S self, the archetype of wholeness.
Playing God, almost.
It leads to that sense of omnipotence, yeah. For Jung, this wasn't just a psychological quirk. He saw it as a spiritual illness.
Yeah.
It comes from ignoring your own vulnerabilities, your own shadow, as he called it.
Which explains why they need constant external validation.
Because they need the outside world to keep confirming this inflated, fragile persona that doesn't really match their inner reality.
Okay, moving forward. Otto Kernberg, Object Relations School. He linked narcissism more directly to aggression and fragmentation.
Kernberg's work is really crucial for understanding why our strategy of intentional neutrality is so effective. He saw the grandiose self not as genuine strength, but as a highly unstable, idealized defense mechanism.
A defense against what?
Against underlying feelings of emptiness, rage, envy. And this defense is maintained through pretty intense mental gymnastics, splitting people into all good or all bad, projecting their own unacceptable feelings onto others, devaluing anyone who threatens the facade.
So when you stay neutral, you're basically refusing to be split or devalued.
You're refusing to play the game required to uphold their defense. You're poking holes in that fragile, grandiose self by not providing the expected reaction, starving its defense mechanisms. Key features for Kernberg were that empathy deficit and a deep fear of dependency.
It sounds like a very shaky house of cards.
It often is. But then Heinz Kohut, with self-psychology, offered a slightly different perspective. He reframed it, seeing healthy narcissism as a developmental necessity.
How so?
Kohut believed we all need consistent empathy and mirroring from caregivers early on to build a cohesive sense of self. Pathological narcissism, in his view, results from a narcissistic injury, basically, a failure of that empathic support system.
Leaving a wound.
A deep wound to self-cohesion, yeah. Which helps explain that insatiable hunger for supply or admiration. They're constantly, unconsciously searching for that perfect mirroring they never got.
So our strategies, the silence, the neutrality, they essentially force the narcissist to confront the reality that you are no longer willing or able to be that perfect reflecting mirror.
Exactly. You're withdrawing that function.
And then modern research rounds this out, distinguishing between the loud, arrogant, grandiose narcissism and the quieter, hypersensitive, defensive, vulnerable narcissism.
Right. The outward behavior might look different. One is dominant and dismissive. The other might seem like a perpetual victim, full of shame, but still self-absorbed and defensive.
But underneath?
Underneath, the core dynamic is often the same. That deep internal instability and the reliance on external factors, your reactions, your emotions, to regulate themselves.
So the strategies we're talking about, emotional silence, neutrality, they work because they target that fundamental need for external regulation, no matter if the person is loud and proud or quiet and wounded.
Precisely. It cuts off the supply line at the source.
Okay, we've covered the why from a historical perspective and the how with the strategies. Let's bring it back to the listener's experience, because the sources suggest the ultimate silent torture you mentioned is actually rebuilding yourself without them, doing the very thing they believed and perhaps told you was impossible. They kind of rely on the idea that you'll be left in ruins.
That's a powerful point. The sources are really clear. The real prison, the hardest part of the recovery, is often internal, long after you might be physically separate.
The implants.
Yes. Those automatic thoughts they installed, it's my fault, I'm too sensitive, I overreacted, I have to fix their feelings.
Yes.
The psychological freedom means actively dismantling that structure from the inside. It requires cognitive restructuring. You have to challenge those automatic thoughts.
But that's so hard, especially if you've been gaslit and doubt your own sanity.
Yeah.
How do you actually challenge those thoughts in a concrete way?
It takes conscious effort. The brain, remember, needs evidence to actually change its pathways. So instead of just letting that old "it's all my fault" tape loop endlessly.
You interrupt it.
You interrupt it. You practice creating cognitive dissonance. You ask yourself specific strategic questions like, okay, where's the objective evidence right now for this thought? Or, looking back at that interaction, whose responsibility really was the escalation? Or even just, is believing this thought right now helping me build a stronger, more cohesive self?
You're fact-checking your own implanted thought.
Exactly. You have to stop chasing their approval, even internally, and instead become present with your own clear, evidence-based reality, your integrity.
And the side effect of that internal work is that the lack of your frantic need for their validation paralyzes them.
It leads back to that state the sources call true, genuine indifference, Gleichgültigkeit. And this isn't faked contempt or playing hard to get. It's just emotional boredom with them.
They're just not interesting anymore.
And that, for them, is fatal. They only feel truly alive, truly potent, when they're dominating someone else's emotional landscape, pulling strings, directing the narrative inside someone else's head.
So when you genuinely feel nothing towards them, no hate, no fear, no lingering attachment, not even curiosity,
They symbolically cease to exist in your internal universe. You've completely dismantled the stage they needed.
We really need to acknowledge how hard this is, though,
Yeah.
neurologically. The sources mention the chemical dependency created by that hot and cold cycle.
Oh, absolutely. That intermittent reinforcement, the idealization phase, followed by devaluation, then maybe a breadcrumb of idealization again.
Like a slot machine.
It is, psychologically and neurochemically. That unpredictability hooks the dopamine system way more powerfully than steady, reliable affection does. It creates an addiction loop.
Keeping you trapped, hoping for the next win, the next hit of idealization.
So leaving isn't just a logical decision. It requires serious neurological deprogramming. You have to actively confront the trauma bond, the ways your brain might have started associating that familiar pain or chaos with a twisted kind of security.
Your brain has to learn that real safety is in the new calm, not the familiar storm.
Precisely. It's learning a new definition of safety.
And finally, dealing with the residue of gaslighting. That deliberate attack on your sense of reality designed to make you doubt everything.
Yeah, the goal there is confusion and self-doubt. So healing absolutely requires confronting the shame that often comes with it. Shame for falling for it, shame for staying so long.
And instead,
You have to consciously, deliberately validate your own pain, your own experience, your own reality, even if no one else does, especially if they deny it.
that process of putting yourself back together, that inner unification,
Yeah.
becoming the person you were before, or maybe even a stronger version.
That is the true transformation. When you become whole again, when you stop defining yourself in relation to their attacks or their needs, they lose all access. They can't manipulate coherence. They don't know how.
So the core takeaway here, it feels pretty profound.
I think so. The shift is total. You stop being just a reactive mirror reflecting their needs and distortions, and you become an autonomous, unpredictable, whole person.
Your focus shifts completely.
Completely away from managing them, changing them, understanding them, and entirely onto learning, choosing, and acting for yourself. The moment you fully step into your own self, your own reality, they can't reach you anymore. No manipulation works on someone who doesn't need anything from the manipulator.
And that's the final turn of the screw, isn't it?
Yeah.
What the sources imply is the deepest torture for them. It's the simple, quiet realization that they are just no longer relevant because they cannot control someone who's genuinely found themselves. They expected you to crumble, maybe even come back. Your refusal, your wholeness, your indifference, that's the ultimate checkmate.
It truly is.
So for you listening, maybe the thought to sit with is this. What does it really mean deep down when you realize your emotional silence isn't primarily a tactic to punish them, but actually the sound of your own freedom? And that very freedom you're building is perhaps the most terrifying thing they could possibly witness.
Thank you for joining me on the Holistic Path. If this video helped you on your journey of body, soul, and purpose, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for weekly wellness wisdom. Check out these videos next to continue your transformation. Until next time, stay holistic.